evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you everyone for coming up here. Firstly, I would like to welcome you all to CMA Conversation 360 series, where our main aim is to revive the monthly lecture series of CMA. So the theme on which we are going to discuss today is business opportunities and challenges and leadership lessons in the contemporary times. And for today, we have a very renowned leader of recent times, Mr. Abhijit Banerjee, the Managing Director of Linde India. Now I would like to request Mr. G.M. Kapoor, the President of Calcutta Management Association, to welcome the gathering and introduce the speaker, sir. Welcome, sir.
And welcome everyone, especially Mr. Banerjee, who has been kind enough to agree to deliver this evening's lecture. We have revived this particular program after some years, actually post-COVID. And earlier, if all you senior members would certainly remember that we used to have something called the Pattern Talk Shop. That has taken this new avatar, which is now called Conversations 360, in association with Caring Minds. Caring Minds is actually Mrs. Budhia's brainchild, and she is taking this initiative forward. She was very happy to associate with us in this program, and she is actually involved in a big way with improving mental health. That is her basic objective in starting this Caring Minds program. Will we run the video? Video on Caring Minds International?
She has not said she will do it. She wanted to do it herself.
Okay. Otherwise, there was a program to acquaint all of you with what Caring Minds is doing. However, maybe next time when we have this program, we will do the needful. Today we have with us a stalwart of industry. He is not going to give you a lecture on what to do and what not to do. He is going to share his experience, and also, as he said, will introduce an element of fun in it. So we are all looking forward to that. And just to give you an introduction of Mr. Banerjee. Mr. Banerjee has rich experience of about 35 years in the manufacturing sector, covering design, engineering, project management, marketing, business development, and strategic account management across reputed multinational companies, including a deputation for 18 months at Thyssen, Bochum, Germany. He joined Linde India, then BOC India in 2009, has been its managing director since 2019. Mr. Banerjee is a member of the General Council of the Gas Industry Association and has served as its president in the period 2019-21. He was a member of CII's task force on the National Oxygen Action Plan formed during the wave 2 of the COVID pandemic. He is presently the vice president of the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industries. He holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from IIT Kharagpur. So, of course, oxygen, all of you would remember during the COVID days, was the real lifeblood of everyone. So anyway, over to you, Mr. Banerjee.
So just to add, CMA has conferred the Corporate Leadership Award to Linde and Mr. Banerjee.
Okay.
Excellence Awards.
Okay.
Excellence Awards.
So anyway, as he has mentioned, so corporate leader is going to address us.
Good evening, everyone, and good evening, everyone. Thank you very much to the CMA for inviting me. Kapoor Sahab, while I would like to thank you profusely, I just would like to say perhaps I would be very likely the most undeserving person to have stood in front of the CMA. Let me elaborate a bit on that. I am what I am, not as a result of, a long-term vision, a strategy, a plan. There was a friend of mine, still is, whose favorite question used to be, we used to meet not very often, once in 2-3 years. His point was, where do you see yourself 5 years hence? The problem with me is I've never seen myself anywhere, anytime in the future. It's more or less been about what's happening right now. So what I am today is possibly, various coincidences, incidences, accidents, all conniving to put me into where I am today. Just a little bit about me. I am told I was a good student, though I can assure you I have never ever stood first in a class, at least in the full class, in my entire academic term. There were some subjects I loved, and some of them I just was able to scrape through. You would have seen I'm a chemical engineer. Now I am an engineer. Simple. I go through a particular entrance examination. Why am I a chemical engineer? That's because my rank gave me chemical engineering. Somewhere in the middle of my academic journey in my graduation, I realized, academics and me don't go very well together. So unlike almost every one of my batchmates in the institute, I decided not to apply for higher studies abroad, not to do any management studies, just chill, relax, go in for a corporate job. My first job was a campus recruitment one. I joined Shaw Wallace. In our hostel there used to be this trend for all passing out seniors, the juniors used to give a party, and there used to be a one-liner about each of them. For me it was Avijit, he's joining Shaw Wallace, his birthright. So, very interesting times in Shaw Wallace, because I joined when the time they were going through a project phase, they were expanding, and my boss was single-handedly in charge of the whole expansion. No external consultants, no, as I said, no consultants. He handled the whole thing. I, as a fresh engineer out of college, joined him, learned so many things from him. And then after about 1.5 years, the expansion got over. I was put in charge of maintenance utilities, and I had nothing to do. I remember, I suddenly came across a phase where I was hoping that there would be a plant breakdown, that they'll have some work. So I decided enough is enough. I shifted jobs. For the next 18 odd years, I was with EPC companies setting up plants. One of them, some of you would be aware of, used to be a very good company in Calcutta called Auto India, operating out of Camac Street. Unfortunately, they didn't do very well. Their parent company finally sold them off to a local promoter, and then the whole company died. So I was with them for almost 10 years, and then I joined, after 18 years in the EPC world, Auto India, then another company called Mannesmann Demag, or SMS Demag, which is a German company again, setting up steel plants on EPC basis. Certain set of personal issues forced me to shift to Calcutta. I lost my father, my mother refused to relocate, etc. And then there was a time when Linde was looking for someone to join them who came from a steel industry background, which I had, and that's how it went in. And then it's been more than 15 years with Linde. As I said, several accidents and incidents have sort of connived into putting me into this place. How many of you have seen Netflix? I guess a lot of them. There's a particular series which was launched about 6-7 years back called Designated Survivor. Have you seen that? Okay. If you have, then you would relate much better to my position in the way how things happened to me. But okay. So it's been sort of a fairy tale life for me since then, and since there's an element of, I talked about designated survivor, so I was chatting with my colleagues about, I've been invited, so what do I talk about, how do I present it? Then they came out and said, let's make it a bit of a fun. So here we go. I hope you will like it. No, sorry, not this one. Not this one. The one I forwarded to you, your version one. What a PDF. PDF. Yeah, it was too big a file. Yeah. So, this is about my Sholay story. Apart from being the managing director of Linde India, I also, let's say the businesses that Linde has in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh also report to me. So internally, officially, as the Linde world, I'm the head of South Asia. I'll talk about Bangladesh and Sri Lanka also over here. I start with the time 2018 to 2020, when the second and the third largest gas companies in the world, which was Linde AG of Germany and Praxair Incorporated of USA, decided to merge. It was what we used to call a merger amongst equals. The end name remained Linde because Praxair actually was an offshoot of Linde. It had been started by the founder of Linde way back in 1905 or so, during the First World War. Because Linde was a German company, the German link had to be severed, so Praxair became a part of Union Carbide. Then Union Carbide had to be dissolved because of Bhopal, and then Praxair was spun off into an independent company. And then in 2018, the talks about a merger took place and it fructified. Now, as I said, the world's second and the third largest companies. In most of the geographies, either Linde or Praxair was a clear dominant player. So there was not much of a problem in the merger. There were some geographies where there were strong overlaps. And in almost all the geographies, because of competition, regulations and all, either the Linde business was sold off or the Praxair business was sold off. India was one of the very few rare geographies where there was a considerable overlap between the two businesses, and the CCI mandated divestment, but only some divestment. So globally, India was one of the very few companies of the merged entity where we had two different organizations with a strong overlap, substantial overlap in its business, continuing in Linde. Now, one of the drivers for the global merger was that these two companies, they have a lot of things in common, but they complement each other very well. And there was an expectation that there will be a huge amount of synergies coming out of the merger, which actually it did. Linde is technologically the world's leader in its area. We founded the concept of air separation unit, cryogenic technology. So it has thousands of patents, constantly investing in R&D. Whereas Praxair is always known for a very strong operating discipline, very high profit margins, but operating in niche countries, whereas Linde was spread all across the world. So the two companies complemented each other beautifully, and that's why the global merger has been a success. But India is a different ball game. It's been a great success, but there were several challenges. What are the challenges? One is we had two companies who have been bitter competitors in the marketplace, fighting it out, committing harakiri to ensure that the other person doesn't get the business. The two of them have been suddenly told, hey, the two of you are brothers. Cultures were very different between the two companies. Very, very different cultures. But it went off beautifully. At the senior management level, when we started our interactions, we found that a lot of while we have culturally different, we are fighting it out, we have a lot of things in common in terms of the way we would like to do business, the way we like to treat our industry segment, the way we would like to treat our customers. There's a huge amount of similarities. We also realized that both these companies, because of having been in operation in India for several years, they have developed very strong work processes. And we could realize that each of them had some great points. So we actually put together a team. Every function from both the companies, the functional heads sat down together, compared the processes that they have, and created a new unified process. In certain cases like HR, we also went outside. We went to PwC and said that, okay, we have a Linde HR policy, we have a Praxair HR policy. Please tell us what an industry benchmark HR policy should be. Because now we've got a chance to set aside all the bad that was there and pick up what the good ones are. So a huge amount of effort went into sort of unify the processes and the standards and the policies. including technical ones like safety. Safety is a very important thing in our thing. And then we realized that Linde has a particular, the end target is the same, but the processes being used were slightly different. So a unified policy had to be rolled out. Global unified policies we knew would take more time, but in India we had to get our act together. How do we work as a combined entity? So a lot of work was done. Another challenge that both the companies went through were the divestment requirements. The CCI allowed both companies to remain, but we were not intact. Both of them had to sell off some very, very prized accounts of theirs where there was a significant overlap happening. So, as a result of that, the profitability of each of the company really took a hit, standalone profitability. Then came another challenge, is that the ownership structure of the two companies are different. Linde India has been in operation for almost 90 years. Incidentally, next year on 26th January, we'll celebrate our 90th birthday. So because of historic reasons, it's a listed company. And Linde PLC owns 75% of Linde India. Whereas Praxair India was a relatively newer company set out in the 1990s, 100% owned by Praxair, so 100% owned by Linde. Indian government has a clear mandate that a listed company cannot have more than 75% ownership from the promoters. So it's almost impossible to merge a listed and a delisted company together without the promoter's shareholder being diluted. The promoters had an option, dilute the Praxair shareholding to 75% and then merge the two companies. Promoters were very clear. They don't believe in dilution of the shareholding. A delisting attempt was made for Linde India. The minority shareholders came out with a resounding yes. More than 99% voted yes, we will delist. But that time the SEBI norm for delisting was that the price has to be done through a reverse book building mechanism. And the Linde shares, which were being traded at about 400 or so, 500 rupees, that was the time when I had taken over this company as the CEO. The shareholders asked for a price of 2,100 rupees, more than 4 times the value. The promoters didn't see any value in it. And me as a CEO, I would obviously say, no way, our company is not worth that much of money. The shareholders came out as very interesting the next AGM. They told me and the chairman that please tell the promoters they didn't buy at 2,100, just wait and see what happens to the share price. Our share price touched about 10,000 2 months back. It's not taken a dip, but it's about 7,000, 8,000 or so, 4 times what it was then. So with all those challenges, we still had to deliver the synergies which were promised at the global level. We've got two entities craving to work together but can't be merged. So how do we ensure that we get the synergies that we want, at the same time be compliant? We can't go out in the market and compete against each other because that would lead to acquisitions of collusive bidding. How do we put it together? So we actually created a joint venture company where most of the people of both the companies shifted to, and that company provides operations and management services to both the companies. The two companies, Linde India and Praxair India, are still there. They own their assets, they have their contracts, they have their customers. There's a pool of employees under the joint venture company which provides the entire operations support to them. And we created a business allocation protocol that existing businesses would be whoever has that business will continue. Future businesses, what will be the methodology in terms of allocating that business to a particular company, we created a detailed thing. So what are the key learnings that we came? Conflict management, leadership development, people management, opportunity identification, and transparency, because you're dealing with two companies who are fighting against each other. You needed to earn the trust of the other side. It went off very well for us. 5 years after what we call, it wasn't a merger, it was an integration. Though we had to sell off Linde India, I'm just talking from a Linde India perspective, we had to sell off a very, very profitable business. But in spite of that, over the last 5-year journey, on a sales front, growth has been a bit muted, about 11% CAGR. On the profit front, profit after tax, about 35% CAGR over the last 5 years. The team did a fabulous job in ensuring that the synergies of two very good operating companies are fully milked to the maximum extent. And because of this, we became debt-free, we are sitting on a pile of cash, were able to develop our parents in the corporate office, they realized that, okay, this is now an entity that we can trust upon. So now, let's say the investment, we've got a free access to as much funds as we need for investments. As we speak today, Linde India is on the verge of investing more than 3,000 crores of rupees. And we know in future also we will be able to continue doing spending. So this was something I wanted to cover to you. I mean, how two entities can get merged, the challenges that we saw, and how we made the best out of it. The day the board of Linde India approved the integration was 23rd March 2020. That night, the lockdown was announced. We knew something bad was happening. The board members, the independent directors had asked me, are you sure this is the way this is the right time? We said, no, we've lost too much of time. Globally, all other entities in Linde were under the unified banner for more than a year. We were holding back because of the failed delisting agreement, attempt, etc. We said, enough is enough. The unfortunate part of two companies' merger is some of the synergy benefits also comes from manpower synergies. That is unfortunate. But we assured the directors that we will see to it that whoever we identify as redundant to the new organization, we will handhold them through this period of crisis. Only after that we will let go of them. That was, of course, not a great time in my thing in terms of, but unfortunately in the corporate world, one has to go through things like that. So what I wanted to say is that the whole integration, while the teams had been working at the back end for some time, the front end work started when people couldn't meet each other. So everything was done on a virtual platform. We had a 3-month window from 1st of April to 1st of July, where we would be doing this integration in phases, first to the back office, then the front of the production people. First with the back office, then was the production people, last of all would be the customer facing people. We did it, and not a single customer of ours ever faced a single challenge because of the change that was happening with the new company now providing services, with a new setup and integrated setup. Not a single customer ever felt this thing. So it was again as I said, and all this was done when people were stuck at their homes operating through just the Teams platform. That's all. Wave 1 got over. Next year, Wave 2 came in, and that was atrocious. Just to give you some numbers, medical oxygen has been a small but significant part of our revenue. Relatively small. I mean, overall scheme of affairs, it's less than 10%. But we like it because it's about the human thing, taking care of people, saving lives. Prior to the pandemic, the overall medical oxygen demand in the country is estimated was about 1,000 tons per day. And we in Linde India used to do about 200 tons, Fraxer about 150 tons, about 30-35% was done by the two entities together. In Wave 1, the demand went from 1,000 tons to about 4,000 tons per day, managed, no issues. Wave 2, the 1,000 tons went to more than 10,000 tons per day, 10 times the thing. We, as I said, we were the largest and still are the largest medical oxygen supplier. Our brand name is the strongest, so obviously the demand on us also was the strongest. We realized that it was no longer about us meeting the huge demand of our customers. We had to look beyond our customers. There were territories where we were not serving, which was starved of oxygen. We had sort of lots of interactions with the government, then a lot of corporate, our customers said that, look, how can we help you to help the nation? So, we ramped up our production from of medical oxygen, as I said, we were doing over 300, 350, till India was doing over 200. That number went to more than 3,400 tons, 3,500 tons. We did not know that we had that much of capacity. We thought our capacity for liquid oxygen was about 2,500 tons. The operations team did a great job in squeezing every last drop of. We produce a lot of oxygen, but most of it is gaseous oxygen, which is sent through pipeline to the customers. Liquefaction capacities are limited. But that itself, the team was able to get almost a 50% increase. That was one. The next problem was that most of our production facilities are in the eastern part of India, because primarily it came in from catering to the steel industry, and the steel industry is in the eastern part of India. So the challenge was how, whereas the pandemic, if you remember wave 2, the first huge thing happened in initially Mumbai, then Delhi. I mean, Delhi was I think a case study should be done by how badly a local government can handle a crisis. Incidentally, he happens to be my batchmate from Kharagpur. And Delhi was not our market. So we realized, now we are able to make that liquid oxygen. How do we get it to Delhi? A normal, if we are sending a tanker, is it will take that 1,500 kilometers will take roughly around 5 days each way. We have strong safety requirements. A tanker normally does not travel for more than 250-300 kilometers a day. So that's a 10-day return trip. There are not so many tankers in India to supply that much. So it called for some out-of-the-box thinking. The government was there to support us. As I said, some corporates, some of our bigger customers, Tata Steel, ITC, Adani, they were there to support us. What did we do? We introduced the concept of RoRo, of tankers on railways. There was a problem with that, is that we could not use bigger tankers because of the height of the most of the routes were electrified. We could use it only on the diesel thing, or we had to use smaller tankers, not practical. For the first time in India, we got the government of India to agree to use ISO containers on railway tracks. The government agreed to it. Of course, the Indian Railways was a big support. A lot of study was done in terms of what should be the speed, what should be the acceleration, braking speeds, etc. And the problem was there were no ISO containers in the country, because ISO containers were banned. They could not be used. They were used only sparingly. They were almost not used. ISO containers were in the rest of the world. What did we do? Being a part of a global company, we reached out to our sister companies, who reached out to their suppliers. We got hold of almost 100 odd ISO containers. Now, Tata Steel, as I said, came to us, ITC, that how can we help you? So we said, look, those containers have to be brought to India. They have to be rented for a period of 6 months or 1 year. They said, sure. I mean, forget CSR. We'll try for CSR. Even if you don't get CSR approval for it, we are there to sponsor. How did the containers come in? Incredible. Indian Air Force, their massive cargo planes brought in some containers. Indian Navy got in containers from Singapore. All we were arranging, Indian Air Force got them, Indian Airlines got them. We chartered commercial, cargo flights. The one that came to Calcutta from bringing in containers from, I think that was from Hong Kong, was the second largest cargo aircraft ever built. One of those Illusion series. We got those in, got them on the railway tracks of India, and were able to supply. So initially we were able to supply to the north, Delhi, Punjab, Uttarakhand. By that time the west was much in a better position. And then the COVID shifted, the effect shifted to south, so we were sending from east to south, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai. Then the problem shifted to Bangladesh. So we used the same containers and took them into Bangladesh on the Indian railway tracks, Indian Railway and Bangladesh railway tracks. Then the problem went to Sri Lanka. We got those containers on barges and sent them to Colombo. And yeah, happy to say that we did save some lives. And amongst all of that was, of course, sitting at home, lockdown, everything through a virtual world, and at the same time trying to help, taking care of all this, also trying to help the wife with household chores, no maid servant at home. It was brilliant stuff, absolutely. Someone asked me, how did you feel when the wave 2 died? I hope I'm not taking up too much. How did you feel when wave 2 got over? I said the only feeling that I had was that I won't have to charge my phone 3 times a day. So yeah, and the team, as I said, we have a brilliant team. Every function, operations rose to the challenge, produced 50% more. The sales team were constantly liaising with the government officials. The government. While we got great support from the government, it was also a huge botheration. Every plant of ours used to have 8 or 9 government officials, someone from the transport department, someone from the health department, someone from the home departments, some from the FDA department, food and drugs. Everyone sitting at our thing. And I remember once Dr. Devi Shetty had called me and said that when he was made a part of the Supreme Court had appointed a committee to look into the whole thing. Dr. Shetty was there. He had called me and said, Abhijit, what are the things that you feel I should be telling the committee and what support you need? So I said 2 things. One was the vaccine was just coming out. I said, please, can our employees, our frontline employees, be given the same status as a healthcare professional so that they can get the vaccines? And number 2, please, let's not have too many government people sitting on our heads. Talking about the government interference, several of our tankers were hijacked by government officials. And we also had an incredible chaos when one of our competitors' oxygen cylinder carrying truck was impounded from Haryana, was impounded by the Delhi government officials and not released to Haryana in a tit for tat because our cylinder filling station is in Haryana. The Haryana government locked our gates. And then the social media came in and said that Linde is refusing to supply to Delhi. This was absolute nonsense. The local government has actually put in a blockade, and so finally again, luckily the central government was a big help, and we had developed channels into them. They intervened and got it sorted out. What after that? Lots of opportunities and challenges. I think now it's acknowledged, partly because of, let's say, the strong points that are there in the India economy, and partly because the way the rest of the world has shot itself in its foot some way or the other. India is acknowledged to be a place which is going to grow. We are seeing that. I'm sure we will see a lot of challenges in the growth that we do expect to have. So, huge amount of opportunities are there. At the same time, since 22, we've also come across some incredible geopolitical volatilities which were totally unexpected. To name a few, as I said, I look after the Sri Lanka business also. In 2022, the Sri Lanka economy went into a meltdown. On top of it was total political anarchy. We have a fabulous team over there. It's a small country with not a very big, let's say, industrial portfolio. We have a very small business. It's a dominant player, more than 60% of the market share, but very, very small. It's smaller than any of our small plants that we have in India, but very well respected over there and does a very good job. So, they faced some incredible problems. They didn't have fuel. Ours is a delivered model. We always deliver the products to our customer. We didn't have fuel to deliver the products. For running our plants, we were able to convince the government to put it on a top category so that we could at least produce that oxygen, mainly from a hospital perspective. But again, fuel was one, money. There was no, we couldn't, anything more than $50,000 worth of orders could not be placed. So the team actually did a great job. They converted everything into one was everything was on advance basis because, when things go down, when the economy takes a downturn, it's more about how much of management action that you can take to protect your business that really helps you. You can't change the economy. You can't change the political uncertainty. But what you can change is how you are handling the uncertainties that your business is facing. So the CEO of our Sri Lanka business, we had some discussions, and he said, Abhijit, I would like to do this. Are you okay with it? I said, yeah, please. So it became either you have to give a bank guarantee or it's sort of a cash advance or something like that. With that, we were able to preserve cash, which very few other companies could. Luckily, we had some customers who were into export-oriented stuff, so we said, okay, we will supply you oxygen only against dollar payments. With those dollar payments, we could use to buy raw materials from, because Sri Lanka is not self-dependent. There's a lot of imports happening to sustain that Sri Lanka business. And of course, Sri Lanka saw some incredible inflation and a dollar devaluation. The team did a great job at pricing. The way we look at pricing, I hope none of our customers are here. For us, pricing is basically what we look at pricing is we are never satisfied. We have something called a PCR, price cost recovery. 100% price cost recovery would mean that if my cost has gone up by 100 rupees, my price has gone up by 100 rupees. We are never satisfied with that. Because that means overall my profit margin has gone down. Percentage profit has gone down. So ideally we target at least 140, 150% PCR. As I said, I can mention all this because my customers aren't here. So the team in Sri Lanka did a fabulous job. Their costs went up and up because of galloping inflation, and so did their prices. Next came Ukraine. Along with Ukraine came the problems of sourcing from Russia. Being a part of an American registered company, we had to cut off all links. We had to cut off links from Iran, which was hardly any significant business, long time back, being a German company. But after Ukraine, we had to cut off any links with outsourcing from Russia. Ukraine landed up into becoming a big problem for Bangladesh because the oil prices went up. Because of Ukraine, Europe went in through a recession, and the Bangladesh economy, a lot of it is dependent on export of ready-made garments. That went for a toss. Their oil costs went up. They're solely dependent on imported oil and gas. So Bangladesh business went into a huge turmoil. Again, the same thing was, how do you manage that business? How do you ensure that your business is running? Business continuity is important, but at the same time, at the end of the day, you're doing business to earn money. It should not be that you go on selling goods and you're unable to recover the money. Long time back, I'd done a management course, and this was a professor from Harvard University who had told us that any sale to a customer is a gift till you receive the cash for it. So, cash is very important in our business, and that's something we always see on. Now we are facing with the Gaza problems coming out of Gaza. Partly because of the post-COVID issue, where because of which shipping times, let's say from China to India, which were in the range of 20-25 days, has become 40-45 days. Now the Gaza has added its own problem to it. We have a lot of imports coming in from US on a regular basis, whether it be specialized gases or it be items for our projects. What used to be a 35-day shipping period is now 60-65 days, and the implication on costs also. These geopolitical problems, as I was saying, the Russia thing and all, also led us into once again looking at our supply chain and identifying more and more vendors. A lot of these specialized gases and chemicals that we buy can come in only from vendors who are totally certified. So it's not just that we come across a vendor in Korea and we start buying from that. It's a very strict certification process, both in terms of the safety requirements and the quality requirements. So all this taught our team that, look, things are very, very, let's say, volatile. And you need to be open all the time, look at options. You can't get stuck with one supply chain. You have to look at 2 or 3 or 4 alternative supply chains. Albeit some of them could be at a higher cost level also, but so what, at the end you have to continue the business. So these are some of the things that we did go across. And again, as I said, hats off to our team who have been able to ensure that all these challenges have been to a large extent mitigated, and as I said, we in India are poised at the cusp of a huge growth, and I expect that Linde India will also be leading the charge in terms of its growth, in terms of revenues, in terms of profit and all. that was more or less it from my side. Some snapshots. This is one snapshot I'm very, very proud of. This is an outcome of the COVID. During COVID, when people were locked down and all that, this was wave one, relatively mild only. So we used to have these coffee sessions, and then during one of the coffee sessions with the employees, this was with the group of female employees, there was a point raised that will we ever see a cylinder filling station operated by women? A cylinder filling station, while it's mechanized to a large extent, but still calls for physical thing. Like for example, the cylinders. Each cylinder weighs about 47 kgs, and they have to churn a cylinder while moving it. It calls for physical effort. So the question was, can we ever have a women-operated cylinder filling station? The team said, yeah, we can do it, and they demonstrated it. This is the Linde's first and only, and possibly the world's first and only female-operated cylinder filling station at Trichy. I mean, I remember when we went for the inauguration, there was a sweet young girl, mid-20s or 30 perhaps. She said, I weigh 42 kgs and I handle a cylinder which weighs 47 kgs. And these are some photographs I was telling you, the containers being unloaded from those massive cargo aircrafts. I think there's one, that's not here. Okay, this is again the containers moving on railway tracks. So yeah, just wanted to share some of the experiences that I've had. Sorry, as I said, I'm not really equipped to be a management guru or give any gyan on management. It's beyond my capabilities, but I've been through some very interesting twists and turns in life, and just thought of sharing some of them. Thank you, Kapoor sir.
Thank you. I think inquisitive minds, if you're willing to take.
Sure. I hope I'll be able to
Yeah, please, if you
do some justice to the.
Will you kindly share a few words about Linde and the earlier Indian Oxygen VOC?
Yeah, sure. As I said, 1935, BOC UK formed its Indian subsidiary called Indian Oxygen and Acetylene Company Limited. I'm not 100% sure of the time frames. I have it somewhere on my computer. Sometime in the 1970s or 80s, the acetylene was dropped. It became Indian Oxygen Limited. Then sometime in the 1990s, it became IOL. Then early 2000 or so, it became BOC, India Limited. BOC, a British oxygen company, was bought by Linde in 2006 globally. That was actually a classic case of a whale being eaten up by a smaller fish. Linde was significantly smaller than BOC, but it did a hostile acquisition of BOC. And
That time VOC business was not only glass, that was on welding part.
okay, good point.
It was taken by Sub.
Good point. Yeah. So globally, British Oxygen Company was very much into welding. In India also, we had a strong welding division. Sometime in the 1990s, actually globally before that itself, BOC started shedding off its welding business. In the 1990s, the Indian welding business was sold off to SAB. Sometime back, the business in South Africa was sold, and just 2 months back, we sold off our welding business in Bangladesh also to SAB. So now Linde, the reason for selling it off is very simple. Linde is a gases company. We realize that we cannot contribute to the growth of that welding segment if we don't have the technology to support that. We were not doing justice to that segment. A segment can grow only when there's good technical support behind it, new developments being introduced and all. Linde realized it's not capable of it. So 2006, the ownership of BOC India shifted to Linde, but since the brand name BOC was so strong, the branding of BOC India into Linde India happened only in 2013. From 2013, it's been Linde India.
Is hydrogen in your horizon?
Absolutely.
Clean hydrogen? You're there in?
Let's talk about hydrogen first, then I'll talk about clean and green and blue and white. and pink hydrogen. Hydrogen, yeah. Linde, if you see globally, is possibly the single largest producer of hydrogen, primarily being used in the refinery segment. All this Bharat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The higher the number, the more cleaner the fuel, and for that you need more hydrogen. So while refineries produce some hydrogen as part of the refining process itself, they also need far more hydrogen to get into cleaner fuels. And Linde is definitely the world's largest hydrogen manufacturer. In Texas, in the Houston Bay Area, we have, I'm not too sure, more than 10 plants supplying into 15 refineries, all connected through hundreds of kilometers of hydrogen pipeline, all owned by Linde. Not only that, we also have a cavern, an underground cavern which is filled with high pressure hydrogen, which acts as a buffer. In terms of high demand, it releases the hydrogen. In terms of lower demand, hydrogen is filled in. So we are very big in hydrogen. Coming to the colors of hydrogen. The hydrogen I was talking about, the refinery segment. Okay, there are other consumers also who need hydrogen, but it's primarily the refinery segment. The other consumers also there. This is what is called grey hydrogen, because there's a CO2 coming out of it. It's mainly being formed from SMR, the steam methane reforming, where natural gas and steam are cracked to produce hydrogen, and either CO2 or CO, depending on what is needed. So there's a lot of CO2 coming out over there. So now, during the pandemic, I think a lot of people had a lot of time to sit down and wonder what's happening to the world, and hydrogen was discovered to be the panacea for all the evils. Hydrogen, but of course not the grey hydrogen, the clean hydrogen. Clean hydrogen has various colors. If you are producing hydrogen from renewable energy by cracking of water, then it's called green hydrogen. If you are in a grey hydrogen process, if you are capturing the carbon dioxide and sequestering it, it becomes blue hydrogen. If you are producing hydrogen from a nuclear power plant, then it becomes pink hydrogen. So there are various colors of hydrogen, but hydrogen molecule is still the same. Now, talking about adoption of clean hydrogen in India, lots of talk, unlikely to see much movement right now. Right now is the operative word. There will be. You remember when solar power came in, it was unviable. Now you look at the cost of solar power. So clean hydrogen right now enjoys the same status what solar power enjoyed, say, 15 years back. Very expensive. But as and when, let's say there are more volumes coming in and there are technological advances. Unfortunately, the biggest problem with green hydrogen is it's dependent on a technology which is centuries old, electrolysis. There's been no development. And if you ask me, it's the most primitive technology, very, very inefficient technology for producing hydrogen. There's a lot of work going on in, using the renewable energy, using water, producing hydrogen, but not electrolysis. There are other ways also. Can water be directly cracked? A lot of work is going on. I believe that is where the future lies. Electrolysis, yes, if you convert the amount of green hydrogen that we are talking about, where is the electrolysis capacity? Where is the capacity for building up such electrolyzers? May not be there. But I would agree, 5 years down the line or 8-10 years down the line, Kapoor sir, we'll be talking about a different thing altogether.
So there is a future.
There should be a future. It's the most logical future, but for that technology, the volumes of manufacturing, all that have to take a...
No, like you said, solar panels today are maybe 1/10 the price of...
Exactly. Or mobile phones. Ek zamane mein 16 rupees incoming, 16 rupees outgoing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, please.
Are you also in the inert gas like argon, helium?
Absolutely. That's where we make most of our money. Again, as I said, no customers here. Oxygen and nitrogen, we don't make too much of money. Argon, yes, definitely. Helium, the problem with helium is it's not a very sustained thing. It comes up and down. Sometimes helium goes into a massive scarcity area. And you see, helium, what we call the PVD, the production versus demand thing, it's a global phenomenon. It's not a localized India phenomenon. And right now, as we speak, with Russia having been able to find a route through China to export its helium, helium prices have tanked. Absolutely tanked. They are 40% of what they were 6 months back. So helium margin is something that we are very, very skeptical to talk about because we don't know what's going to happen in the next summer. Argon, yeah, argon, yes, of course. It is one of the most profitable gases that we have.
So, in your early part of yours, when you joined Saulis, under whom you worked, the engineer you just pointed out?
Chauvelus, I was at Aurangabad, the largest distillery. I don't know, I forgot to mention one thing. One great perk of working in Chauvelus was that early in the morning, I used to reach at about 8 o'clock. 8:30 was a ritual where all the executives, there were 11 of us, 11 or 12 of us, had to assemble at the lab and sample the product that was prepared the previous day and the product that would be bottled the next day. No, see, it's very clear. You're supposed to mix it with water at a particular temperature, at a particular ratio, sniff it, then take it in your mouth, swirl it around, and spit it out. I promise, I spat out every drop of it, I promise. I compensated for that in the evenings, but
How much is work after that? So it's almost like a tea taster.
absolutely. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. Most of the good brands of Chauvelus is almost a dead company. Royal Challenge whiskey, there used to be something called a Mughal Monarch whiskey. Most of its good brands was created by a person who was then at Aurangabad, M.K. Sen, who was the chief chemist of Chauvelus. His team, the production head, that time Mr. Lokre, was scared of Mr. M.K. Sen because Mr. M.K. Sen would decide whether the product has passed the test or not. Mr. Sen unfortunately was susceptible to cough and cold. The day Mr. Sen used to enter the lab sneezing, Mr. Lokre used to have a big smile on his face. His product would get passed.
So can I ask?
Sure.
Whilst I profusely thank you for your storyline, traversing through your way, what about you very often when I heard that you were extolling the merits of your team. You had a fantastic team.
Of course.
Pre and post-COVID both.
Yeah.
What is leadership lessons? There must be an element of leadership points that you have dovetailed into this. Can you please share? Or
Well,
in general.
I'll be honest with you, it'll be very difficult for me to pinpoint the points, but I'll just talk about some things that I believe in when I'm dealing with a team. For me, the biggest thing is empathy.
Money in contradistinction to sympathy.
I don't think people deserve sympathy. Not everyone deserves sympathy. I mean, maybe a beggar deserves sympathy. But it's more about empathy, trying to understand what that person is all about. What are things that are driving him. That's the way I look at people. Of course, setting not the short-term goals, but the end game. Trying to give a picture of what the end game is to be about. Being open to suggestions. When you have a team of so much experience, you'll get some trash also. Definitely you'll get trash, but you'll also get some great suggestions which can be refined upon. So I somehow am not a proponent of being an autocrat as far as, the way I operate. It's more of a, to some extent, consultative thing, and it's all, I guess, coming out from a sense of mutual respect that is there within the people.
In all my years with PwC and with one oxygen company, that was Asiatic Oxygen, owned by the Jalan.
Yeah.
I've really come across instances where people aren't good listeners.
I'm sorry?
People, they are,
No, like there's a flap which is. Sorry.
people are not good listeners. This quite often poses a tremendous challenge to some of us who lead. We can tricky for it. What's your suggestion?
No, it's not that it's always a very easy time. Sometimes I also feel like, pulling at my hair and trying to rub things in. It's more about talking it through, perhaps. And in certain cases, you will come across elements that you may have to then decide that forget it, tell them, I've heard you, now just do it the way I would like to do it. But that is very rare. In my experience, I've rarely had to do it. It's not that I've never had to do it, but sometimes, yeah, but very, very rare.
I read in several books, in publications, that Mrs. Gandhi used to listen to all her cabinet ministers. She used to call them, maybe jointly or severally. The firm decision she would take herself. And this was said by no one than Sam Mann. Especially in the light of the Bangladesh. It has not come. Any more queries?
Please.
What are the project management philosophies and tools used in the company?
Unfortunately, I left the EPC world 15 years back when I shifted to the gases side. But yeah, we have a project division, and I think they use Primavera for monitoring of project schedules and all. As far as philosophy is concerned, it's simple: deliver a project at the lowest cost at the fastest time. I mean, I don't see any other philosophy that a project should ever have. And of course, the safest way. I mean, safety is without compromise, but do it at the lowest cost at the shortest time.
Are you presently operating from Oxygen House?
That's right.
Your head office is in Kolkata.
Yeah, so Linde India.
Earlier it used to be at Taratala.
Same. It's still there. Same. That's our registered office. Our registered office just beside Bracebridge.
One more thing, has Government of India given any honor to your company or organization?
We were facilitated by a lot of state governments after the COVID pandemic, including Uttarakhand government, Maharashtra government, Karnataka government, MP. But from a central government perspective, I don't recollect having got a formal felicitation. Having said that, one advantage was, as I was mentioning, because we had a lot of interactions with very senior secretary level people, our brand name did get established. Even today, there are some corridors of power which we can access because of the connect that we had created 3-4 years back. But it also came with its pitfalls. When the wave 2 happened, as I was saying, product was a challenge, but we were making it available. Tankers were a challenge. So the government of India came out with a notification saying that all cryogenic tankers would have to be used only for medical oxygen purposes. So that means our customers who are needing nitrogen from us, argon from us, so this question of inert gases, those tankers were mandated by the government of India to be converted into oxygen so that they're capable of it, no issues. They just need to go through a particular certification process in terms of cleanliness. There's a standard SOP around it. The problem is we were at the forefront of the battle, and so ours was the only company whose tankers were converted. Our competitors got away with their normal tankers, and so we lost some customers of argon and nitrogen because of that. So while we made a lot of, as I said, we earned a lot of brownie points, we got recognition, but we also suffered because of being the leader.
Sir, are you also in industrial CO2?
Not so, mainly the F&B portion. Not so much into industrial. F&B.
Which is used for oiling?
No, F&B. Food and beverages.
Okay, not
Welding, yes, because actually we don't directly use CO2. What we have is argon CO2 mixtures.
that is the
What we call ACM.
that is the argo shield.
Yeah. So we actively, our campaign to remove CO2 from welding and introduce argon CO2 mixtures.
and Bhagwati Gas, all are Indian, means your competitor.
No, Airwater is a very interesting thing. Airwater is a Japanese company. It came into India sometime in 2015 or so, 14-15, when they took up some shares in Ellenberry. Subsequently, I talked about divestment. So, Linde India had to divest its business in South, and Praxair India had to divest its business in Jamshedpur. Both these businesses were taken over by Airwater. So now Airwater doesn't have any link with Ellenberry. They have snapped that link, Airwater. But as a result of that, Airwater suddenly became India's third largest gas company by taking over the assets of Linde and Praxair.
Sir, Reflex is what, no? Reflex, Reflex.
Sorry, I haven't heard the name. And Bhagwati and all are local players.
Which is the world's largest now?
Linde, by far.
Number one.
By far. Turnover of about $34 or $35 billion. Market cap of around $200 billion. I think we say that we are a chemicals company, and I think from a market cap perspective, it's the largest chemicals company in the world.
Sir, have you got any support from your main company in the lockdown in the phase?
Our global.
Of oxygen flown into India?
No, it didn't make sense. It didn't make any sense whatsoever. As I said, we were able to produce that much amount of oxygen in India itself.
Oxygen plants, there was a lot of people cry about.
So those were the PSA units, the pressure swing adsorption units. That's where the government mandated, the PM Care Fund. More than 5,000 odd PSAs were sent. To the last of our knowledge, out of those 5,000, 3,500 are not working. The balance 1,500 are also possibly not working.
Any help from your main person?
Main was, first of all, the contacts that we got in terms of getting the containers over. And there's a very interesting thing happened. When Wave 2 happened, and we realized that there's a huge thing, our global CEO, who's an Indian, by the way, from Calcutta, graduate from Xavier's College, Sanjeev Lamba, he had called me and then said, we suddenly realized that there could be a possibility where oxygen may have to be flown into regions where tankers cannot go. So then he said that, Abhijit, I will give you our best resources from a SHEC safety perspective. I will task them to look at the ways and means on how liquid oxygen containers can be air freighted. So we actually got into the capacities of each and every helicopter of Indian Air Force to understand whether these containers can be airlifted to remote locations, what would be the time needed. Luckily, that never had to be used.
What is the market share in India, like yours or Universal Army or NOS?
See, in India we have, first of all, depends on what you call the market share. A lot of companies make their own gases, what we call the captive production unit. So if I take that out, then you look at, there are a lot of small regional players, local players, regional players. If you take all that as the thing, then possibly I would say roughly Linde India and Praxair India together have around 35% market share. Inox Air Products would be having something around 20% market share. And there are a host of small companies which have of course, Airwater and Air Liquide also are there. So if you ask me which is the single largest gas company in India, it is Inox Air Products, because Linde in India is still operating with two companies, Linde India and Praxair India. But if you see it as an group wise, Linde is the biggest when you add Linde India and Praxair India together. Thank you very much, and it was a pleasure for me to sort of go through whatever I've been through in my last 5-6 years journey. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir, for an insightful discussion. I think all of us there is a lot of knowledge we have all got, and it will be enriching for all the CMA members. Just a small memento from GM Kapoor, our President and Executive Committee member. Dr. Arjit Banerjee to please present a memento to
Sir, please.
Mr.
So
Banerjee.
this memento is from the Bengal Home Industries Association. Wow. It's something that
একটু কাজ না করলে ফটোটা উঠবে না একটু কাজ
चीज़ बोलते हैं
না আজকে আমরা শুধু অক্সিজেন দেবো। Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার
And I would request a vote of thanks by Dr. Arijit Banerjee, sir. Please.
Very quickly drafted, so please, my apologies if I go wrong somewhere. Sir, you said that you are not a management guru, but my personal experience with listening to many management gurus shows that you can actually bench them and you can actually make them listen to you for hours. My personal experience with your company has been great. In fact, the empathy part that you have talked about reflects not only in your personality, but personally, whoever is knowing you, they know that how much effort you and your company has taken to look into the different societal gaps and actually, selflessly serve them to their optimum capacities. I am a beneficiary, my organization is a beneficiary of that, of course. And thank you once again for being today. I think no applaud can be good enough to actually thank you for the good gesture that you are doing, not only in terms of the chemical bonding, but also bonding the society. And thanks to the audience for being a lovely audience and being interactive. Thank you IMI and Caring Minds for their gesture to give the venue and supporting us. Thank you so much.